Hey, this is Matt and Cheryl here from We're in the Rockies, and the purpose of our channel is to cover the beautiful Rocky Mountain region, the national parks and other activities to do, and we are hoping to be a good resource for you as you plan your vacations and outings to help you get the most of it. We're hoping to be able to provide some good maps and tips on how to make it a great vacation. If this looks like something that could be helpful to you, please subscribe, like the video if you'd like, and leave some comments if you have some extra tips that we missed.
So we get a little frustrated sometimes when we go places and we're trying to kind of do like a pre-cation where we watch it on YouTube and we learn about what we need to see and do there. And a lot of times there's just not very good information out there about it. Maybe some top 10 lists or whatever. But our goal here is to provide a little more comprehensive, almost like a training manual for you to come and see some of these places. So we've prepared a little PowerPoint here on Grand Teton, and we're going to go through that with you right now. So here's a little PowerPoint we've prepared about Grand Teton National Park, and here are the things that we're going to talk about in this video, just so you have an idea of what to expect. And if you're wanting to skip to one of those places, then feel free.
And also, at the very end of this video, we have some hot tips, so you're not going to want to miss those.
Perfect. Overview of the park. So I'm always surprised when people don't really know where places are, or they just want kind of a basic feel for the map of it. So Grand Teton is located in Wyoming in the northwest section there. If we zoom in on Wyoming, you can see that it sits just below Yellowstone National Park, connected by this funny little John D. Rockefeller Jr. Memorial Parkway here. John D. Rockefeller Jr. was instrumental in the creation of Grand Teton National Park, and so they put a little memorial in his name. But you can see the size, just a little smaller, or quite a bit smaller than Yellowstone, but extremely popular to do both of these parks together. Here is an overview map of the park. So you can see that you have the Teton Range right here, the mountain range, this area right here, and then you have just a couple of main roads that go through the park. So this road right here leads down from Yellowstone, and then this is kind of a main highway that goes down to the city of Jackson, Wyoming, and they call this road the Outer Road. And then there's another road that goes along here inside the park that they call the Inner Road, or the Teton Park Road. And both of those roads have a bunch of pullouts where you can get great views of the mountains. And then there's about 6 glacial lakes right along the base of the mountains there. And then also a very big lake, Jackson Lake, right here. So that's just a very brief overlook of the park. Now, the number one thing, the reason why this whole place is a park, of course, is the Grand Teton Mountains. Here's an image from Schwabacher Landing of these amazing mountains here. This is a relief map at the Visitor Center that just kind of gives you an idea of what the park is about. It's kind of an interesting place. Here's another look at it if we look from, we're looking north. But it's an interesting place because what you have is kind of a lot of flat territory out here, a lot of flat ground, and then suddenly, wham, the mountains just rise majestically into the sky. So just a little bit of information about the Tetons. The rocks themselves, the actual mountains, are among the oldest rocks on the earth, but the Rocky Mountain Range in general is one of the youngest one of the youngest mountain ranges, and this particular range here, the Tetons, are the youngest mountain range in the Rockies. So it's really interesting because these really old rocks that sit way, way, way down underneath the earth have been pushed upwards and just point up high into the sky, which is what makes this such an interesting place. The peaks sit at about 13,000 feet. This highest peak here is Grand Teton, sits at about 13,000 feet. This is not tallest by sea level among the Rockies. There are plenty of mountain peaks that go up to 14,000 throughout Colorado and other places in the West. Colorado has the most of them. They call them 14ers. Here, these are 13ers from sea level, but what makes these such a special place is that when we measure from peak to like the nearest ground level is about 7,000 feet. This is the highest. They call this the prominence. They measure this by prominence, not by sea level, in this way, and that is the highest among I think mountains in the lower 48 states. So it's just strange because it's just flat and then suddenly wham, they go right up into the air. So that's what makes them so amazing to look at. And then finally the glaciers here, these canyons right here carved by glacial activity, and you can see just from different viewpoints how incredible it is that these glaciers have just carved these huge tunnels into these mountains. It's really quite amazing. Just a little bit of information. One thing you'll hear about when you go there, this is called the Cathedral Group, and this is the main part of the Grand Tetons with these mountain ranges: South Teton, Middle Teton, Grand Teton. In fact, early French trappers in the area, Teton is a French word meaning breast, and so they call these the Les Trois Tétons, which is the three breasts. And so that's what those stand for. The name's kind of stuck over the years, kind of funny. This Mount Owen, named after one of the early superintendents of the park. And Tiwanaut here is an Indian name. This is what the Indians used to call this whole range, Tiwanaut, which means many peaks. And then you can see here's an actual glacier, this Teton Glacier, that you can actually still see from the ground here. South of the Cathedral Group, you have a couple of main peaks. Albright Peak, named after Horace Albright, who was early National Park Service superintendent, and then Mount Wister, after an author named Owen Wister, who wrote the book The Virginian, which was an incredibly popular Western novel, kind of credited as the first Western novel. North of the park you have, or north of the Cathedral Group here, you have a few other main peaks: Mount St. John, Mount Woodring, Mount Moran. Mount Moran, named after Thomas Moran, who was an artist who came out here with some early expeditions to do some paintings of Yellowstone and this area, which was really instrumental in getting the national park, getting Yellowstone protected as a national park and set aside. Just the whole idea of a national park was really something to overcome early on, and Thomas Moran very instrumental in that.
So Yellowstone or Grand Teton?
He painted both Yellowstone and Grand Teton. So Yellowstone was the first national park. Grand Teton came along later and had some more resistance to it being created as a national park, which has a whole story behind it. This is an image. I put this on here because you can see this river running through it here. This is the Snake River, which is an area where a lot of animals and moose hang out. So really pretty views with the Snake River in the foreground there. All right, let's talk about lakes and hikes here. Some of the most popular ones. Here again is the map. And this park almost feels, don't you think, Cheryl, like it's divided between kind of like the north is like a resort town almost, and the south is more like hiking, kind of national park feel.
Absolutely. The north, you see a lot of boats up there. It does. It feels like a lake town up there. And the south is, to me, I feel like it's the essence of a national park. I mean, you feel like you are part of the woods, part of nature. There's beauty everywhere. It's all pretty, but the southern part, I think, is my favorite.
Yeah, so I think if you're going to Teton for the first time, you're going to want to spend most of your time in this southern part. You're going to want to see the glacial lakes and the hikes and all that. And the most popular thing to do in the park is Jenny Lake right here. And at Jenny Lake, you can take a shuttle boat across the lake to these hikes. These are the most popular hikes. I put this little image here. This is looking at the mountains directly because it kind of helps show some of the trails and all that. But there's a little parking area right here next to Jenny Lake. And then you can take this boat across the river there. And then you can hike to a place called Hidden Falls and Inspiration Point. Change the color of this. You can also hike around the lake if you want to, but it's about 2 miles one way, which we think is kind of maybe a waste of time because
here's the thing, is there are beautiful hikes in many places in the park, and taking that ferry across the lake is kind of a unique experience. And if you're not wanting to hike a bunch of miles a day, or if you have children with you, well worth the money. Plus they have a family rate, which really makes it a lot cheaper than if you were just doing individuals. But I feel like taking the ferry enables you to have some more stamina to see other parts of the park.
Yeah, it costs a little bit of money, but we think worth it. I mean, usually, you're kind of under a time crunch when you're going to some of these places. So, but if you get there really early and you want to hike.
The hikes in Grand Teton are so scenic. Just even like the first quarter mile of the trailhead, you're seeing beautiful things. So you're not having to hike for a long way to see some pretty amazing nature.
Yeah, because you're right there next to the mountains. You're just in them instantly. So we took the boat ride across here. As you walk up to Hidden Falls here, you cross over this bridge. Really pretty area. Little cascades. Here is Hidden Falls. And you don't really, it's called hidden because you kind of have to leave the trail not leave the trail, but the trail kind of forks in a way, and then you walk back in there and then you see it. You can't really see these falls right from the main part there. You have to walk back in. You won't miss it. Just make sure you follow the signs. I want to show you another shot of Hidden Falls there. And once you leave there, you'll head up the side of the mountain here. This kind of looks terrifying, doesn't it?
It doesn't feel terrifying, though. I
know, look at that sheer cliff, though. It just looks like...
I don't recall being too worried about the safety of our children. I guess I kept them close to the wall, but you can see, though, pretty views as you're climbing.
Mm-hmm. And then you get up to Inspiration Point here, where you overlook Jenny Lake and the whole valley, Jackson Hole Valley. So the valley is called Jackson Hole, hole being another term for valley that the early mountain trappers, the mountain men and the trappers used to use for valley. So that's why they call it Jackson Hole. The city is called Jackson, which is south of the park, Jackson, Wyoming. Here's a video at the top.
So during peak tourist season, you're not going to have things like this to yourself. We actually got up and did this fairly early. I think we had the second or third boat that even went out that day. Those shuttles run every 15 minutes. So, as the day goes on, it gets more crowded at the trailheads.
I believe the boat rides start at 7 o'clock in the morning. We got there at 8. We didn't have a tremendously large line. As we were leaving, we noticed the line was much longer. So definitely we would say, again, try to get there first thing, because it does take a little bit of time and the lines will build up. Now I show this map here again because once you get to Inspiration Point, you can just go back down to the boat dock if you want. But it is fairly popular for people to go up this Cascade Canyon right here. And then there's a fork here, North Fork and South Fork. I know that this Lake Solitude is a pretty popular hike that's way up there in the mountains. Obviously, long hike. This would be like a day hike. I'm aware that some people also will come back down here through this Paintbrush Canyon. And so that's a big, long hike. Obviously, you'd want to take a lot of water and some food with you as you go. Also bear spray, I'm sure. Anyway, that's some things that you can do right there. Now, I'll go back here. Oops. This lake right here is called Lee Lake, named for an early fur trapper that settled the area there. Richard Beaverdick Lee settled that area. It's spelled Lay, but it's pronounced Lee. And Richard Beaverdick Lee, very interesting guy and an interesting story. He was married to a Shoshone woman, and when he got married to her, he gave her an English name, Jenny. And so that's why Jenny Lake is named Jenny Lake. So their names are kind of all over this. You can see Lee Canyon is right here. Lee Lake is a lot like Jenny Lake, pretty about the same size of Glacial Lake there, and you can hike out around that if you want to. This lake right here in between is called String Lake, and this is the most popular place to swim in the park, right, babe?
Unless you're going up to the Coulter Bay area. But so when we went to String Lake, I kind of felt like it was an exclusive club. There is no parking there. So if you can get into String Lake, it is beautiful. Very pretty water, clear, nice views. Many people bring kayaks and paddle boards. The thing about swimming at Grand Teton National Park is that it's not like a typical beach with sand and warm water. These are, mountain lakes. They're cold. The water's in the 60s. And so most people don't swim a whole lot in them. They like to just get in the water and paddleboard and canoe. Also, there's a lot of branches in the water and hard rocks and things like that. So you might want to get some protective footwear. But yeah, that's kind of swimming at Grand Teton.
Yeah, we went to a couple of glacial lakes when we were there and got in the water with our kids and all that. But they are kind of rocky, so I would definitely recommend getting some like swimming shoes with soles on them so you can walk around a little bit more. And then, you can see people were just really enjoying the paddle boarding and the kayaking and all that stuff. So String Lake, very cool place, but yeah, we had to get there. We got there at 9:30, and the last spot was being taken. The last parking spot was being taken right at 9:30 in the morning. So, and of course, these lakes are cold. These are glacial lakes. They're up in the mountains. They're only getting up to like 60 degrees or something like that. So to get there early in the morning doesn't maybe feel natural, but that's what you got to do if you want to get a spot. Okay, let's talk about the next lake is Taggart Lake. This is, I would say, the next most popular place to hike to. Taggart Lake, and there's a Taggart Lake trailhead right here. Again, that fills up pretty early. Now that one does have overflow parking. It'll spill out onto the main road for a long ways, and they have not blocked that off this year. They're still allowing that. And then very popular to hike to Taggart and then up to Bradley Lake, which is right next to it there. And then back down. That's a real popular hike. When we went, we just went to Taggart. We didn't end up going over to Bradley.
But I would say that Taggart Lake was probably my favorite hike. I just loved it. I thought there were some different types of scenery on it. And this is the other thing to know. Those popular hikes in the Tetons, they're fairly level and easy. They are not incredibly challenging hikes. So I would say if you're comfortable walking a couple miles, just like, around your own neighborhood, you'll do fine on these hikes.
Yeah, Taggart Lake was a really cool hike because it starts out not the most scenic actually, but then it quickly gets to, some rivers, and then here is right next to this horse ranch. I think this is a dude ranch with some horses there. The horse is way in the background. You can't see it real well in this picture. You get into some aspens. We saw lots of pretty wildflowers on the trail, and for some reason all the ones I took were purple, but that was really pretty seeing all the wildflowers. And then you get to the hike, or you get to the lake here, and what you have is just some real pretty views of the mountains. I mean, you can see in this image right here, that's a real good view of how the glaciers have carved the mountains. I mean, just push those mountains out of there. It's kind of crazy. But, and you can see the sun setting here. We went there later in the day.
Yeah, our night owl trip.
Yeah, so we went back, took a nap, came back there later in the day, about 5 o'clock, and the parking lot had cleared out, and we just parked and had the trail and the lake pretty much all to ourselves.
And Taggart, I believe, is about a mile there and a mile back, a little over a mile.
Yeah, I think so.
So, and that's how a lot of the hikes are. You can get to a lake in about a mile and about a mile back. So just to help you plan distances. And like I said before, most of them are rated easy hikes, and they truly are simpler, easier hikes. Yeah,
so there's so we've covered Jenny Lake, we've covered String Lake, we've covered Taggart and sort of Bradley Lake there. And then the other one that we did last time we went there was Phelps Lake. This is another pretty popular one here. It's the trailhead is at this Lawrence S. Rockefeller Preserve, which is a fairly new part of the park. They've added this little area that has kind of a visitor center there. This is the parking lot, and this is it. This is all the parking there is at this place, and it fills up in the morning, and they do not allow overflow parking here. They actually have a ranger there that's monitoring the whole situation, and you have to wait in line. If you want a parking spot, you literally have to wait in your vehicle in a line, wait for people to leave, and then the ranger will call you down to park.
Yes, and real quick off the point, but huge shout out to the Teton Rangers. Those are some pleasant people that are really, really willing to go out of the way and help you. Sometimes I feel like rangers can be a little on the grouchy side, not always, but like Grand Teton Rangers, they were like above and beyond delightful. They were very nice.
Yeah, we were wondering what the deal was because Yellowstone Rangers weren't always that friendly. And Grand Teton, they were all just super friendly. It was kind of interesting.
Quite a contrast,
yeah.
Yes.
That really was. So anyway, you got to get here really early. I think we got there probably around 7:30 or something like that. And you can see it's already starting to fill up. There is this building, the Lawrence S. Rockefeller Preserve. Rockefeller, one of the wealthiest, Lawrence Rockefeller Jr. Actually, Lawrence. Well, I'm not quite sure who Lawrence is named after, but this preserve here was closed during COVID. We weren't able to go in there, but they have kind of visitor center area. They call this the waterfall experience. I guess because you can walk out on the little ledge there and get splashed a little bit by the waterfall. That kind of sounds like a ride at Disneyland or something. Yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. They had this little waterfall with all the amazing waterfalls in the park. They call this the waterfall experience.
Well, because you can get right next to the waterfall. You can see those little grates right there. You can just stand right in that waterfall.
Yeah.
I was expecting a little more, but it was actually pretty nice.
Yeah, fun for the kids.
And this is a very state-of-the-art trail. Like the bathrooms are nice on it. Oh, sorry, one more hot tip on the Jenny Lake, just to go back. There are no restroom facilities. Like once you cross that ferry across the lake, there's no bathroom, no water fountains, no nothing. So take care of all that before you cross the lake. Bring food, bring water. There's a hot tip for you right there. Just be aware.
This lake also, or this trail that goes up to Phelps Lake. Now you could just do the preserve trail area and then go back, but I think most people hike all the way up to Phelps Lake here. Look, some flowers that aren't purple. Indian paintbrush here. They call this the Lake Creek Trail. It goes right along the creek there through these mountains. Trail's kind of rocky, so you need to be aware of that. And then you get to Phelps Lake here. Notice it's not, this is a little further south than Taggart Lake, so notice the views of the mountains aren't quite as amazing at this lake here. Definitely, if you're going to choose between these two, I would say Taggart Lake for sure.
Oh, for sure. But it's not like you're ever going to be disappointed in a hike at Grand Teton. They're all beautiful, but I guess if you're comparing multiple Grand Teton hikes, yeah, I would not say that's the best one, but it's still beautiful.
Still a very nice one, and people love that preserve area. So good. So that covers some hikes. Now I mentioned that you can do some longer backcountry hikes. This Cascade Canyon that goes out to Lake Solitude and then down. That's a popular one from what I'm aware. I haven't done it. I haven't done either of these because we have little kids and we're not able to go do that right now. But this Death Canyon trailhead goes back in here. Death Canyon sounds a little foreboding, but that's another popular one. Looks like you can kind of go up and around. So if you're a backcountry hiker, plenty of amazing hikes here, I'm sure. Okay, so that covers it for hikes. Now let's move on to the wildlife. This is one of the main reasons people come to this area here is to see, in particular, moose, right? Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the Grand Tetons are kind of a secret. Everyone always thinks about Yellowstone for wildlife, but here's a little tip. We saw way more wildlife in Grand Teton than we did at Yellowstone this summer. would never
Yeah.
have thought that happened, but it was true, and we didn't have to work that hard to see any wildlife.
I think part of the reason was the areas to see wildlife at Grand Teton, it's easier to get there early in the morning than it is Yellowstone, where those areas are way out on the east side of the park, far away from West Yellowstone. It's just kind of easier to wake up early and see these areas, I think. Plus, at night, if you're way out there on the east side of the park at Yellowstone, it takes a long time to drive back. There's big old traffic jams. Where here, again, you're right there by Jackson or by the campgrounds. These are some moose we saw. Now, this moose right here in particular, we didn't see this in Grand Teton. This is at my parents' cabin nearby, but just kind of shows you, in case you haven't seen moose before, what a moose is. I looked up the moose range in America, and there's a lot of moose in Maine. Maine has a ton of moose. Canada has a ton of moose. But other than that, just up along the Canadian border and Maine is where mostly they are. But then they dip down into the Rocky Mountains, down into this area here, Wyoming and Idaho. So if you live, away from the border of Canada, you probably haven't seen a moose unless you're in the Rocky Mountain region here. So they are really fascinating animals to look at.
Yeah.
Okay, there's also a lot of elk here in Grand Teton. This particular picture taken in Yellowstone, but I don't have high-powered cameras. Sometimes you see wildlife, but you don't get a really good chance to take a good photo.
And there is a great big elk refuge between Grand Teton and Jackson Hole, and in the wintertime you can see hundreds of them.
All just gathered there. You can go on little sleigh rides out there to see them. There are bears in Teton. This photo is taken at the Grizzly and Wolf Discovery Center outside of Yellowstone, but I put it on here because there are bears in Grand Teton, and I am sure there was a bear that we drove by one the last time we were there, but there was some rangers kind of blocking off the road. There was a bunch of traffic. We couldn't really stop to go see it, but
Yes.
But I had a friend who saw a bear there just recently, so you could definitely see bears there. Here's a black bear. This is, again, at another place called Bear World outside of Yellowstone.
Yes, it is not common to be driving through a national park and have a bear do that. Just in case you're worried, you have to work really hard to find a bear. They're not coming up to your car and smiling at you like this one.
Like at Bear World. But I put these pictures on here just to kind of show you. This is in Grand Teton, so this is some antelope or pronghorn. That, in fact, there's a place called Antelope Flats. That
They were there every morning, it seemed like, hanging out.
Yep. We saw some deer there as well. I don't think I included a picture here, but we saw some deer. Here's a video of some bison. Also in the Antelope Flats area.
Oh yeah, this was one of the best bison experiences I've ever had. They were really kind of, I don't know, they were moving around. They had some gusto.
Yeah, usually they're just standing around like cattle, but I think they were probably in the rut here, and they were kind of running around chasing each other, having a good time. So this dirt road here is called Mormon Row, and is a real popular place to take pictures, but also to see some wildlife here. In fact, let's talk about that, where to find wildlife. I've done a whole nother video on this where I go into some more detail, but let me just give you a quick overview of where you can see the wildlife here. This road right here is called the Moose Wilson Road, and that's because it goes from this junction, which is called Moose Junction, down to a city named Wilson. But it's named Moose for a reason. There's moose that hang out around there quite a bit. There's a little turnout right around there somewhere that you can just stop, and has an overlook of the river, and apparently moose like to come there. We stopped there at dusk a couple of times, although we never saw one come there, but that's a very popular place. People line up there at dusk. Up here in the northern part of the park, every time I've driven through there, I've seen a big bull elk. So they hang out up there quite a bit, and the ranger also told me that that's where bears hang out. You're more likely to see bears up there. There's a little turnout called Oxbow Bend Lookout right there. That's a popular spot, and in fact that's where we saw what I think was the bear, where the rangers were all blocking off the road. Must have been a bear real close to the road there. So bears and elk up there, moose down at the southern part, and then this area here is called Antelope Flats Road right there, and then that's where Mormon Row is, and there's a dirt road that comes out here to this Grovant Road. That's what that's called. Okay, so there's kind of a butte in the middle here, but if you drive out on this Antelope Flats Road down there, down that dirt road, Mormon Row, and out on that Grovant Row, that's where we saw like 6 moose. We saw moose like every day hanging out at this Grovant River right here, and we saw a bunch of deer, antelope, bison. I mean, that was the gold mine over there.
Yep, exactly. So if you're going to go to one road to see wildlife, that's it. That's the best spot. If you only have time for that, you might see something.
Okay, let's talk about other activities that you could do at Grand Teton. We've listed them here. So swimming. I asked the ranger, I said, where can you swim in the park? And he said, anywhere. Anywhere you want to. But the water's cold. There's not a lot of actual swimming going on. There's some water sports. We mentioned String Lake and Coulter Bay, probably the 2 most popular places to swim.
And Coulter Bay is much bigger than String Lake. Coulter Bay is huge. There's a lot of picnic areas set up around there. And that's, Coulter Bay is kind of the resort town. There's a lot of spots. There's more people boating up there. You don't really see boats on anywhere but Jackson Lake, I believe.
Right. Okay, canoe, kayaking, and paddleboarding. This is really popular. Of course, you can see people here in this picture at String Lake doing this. You can rent these at Jenny Lake. You can rent canoes at Jenny Lake and paddle around Jenny Lake. There's a place called Dornan's, which is by Moose Junction, that also rents some water equipment and all that. So you can rent those and take them with you over to String Lake. You can raft the Snake River. So the Snake River runs through the park, and it's really popular to raft the Snake River. Not so much in the park, but there are places out of the park that are extremely popular. There's whitewater rafting. You could rent a guide or something like that.
Yeah, they may put you in, like you might get in your raft inside the park, but you'll go through the outside of the park and hit some real whitewater adventure rafting.
But I know that at Dornan's and at some other places there are tours, and there are places you can rent some things. So if you're interested in rafting, I know that there's a couple of places in the park where you can put into the river and float down to like Moose Junction, get out. So definitely, if you're interested in it, that would be a really fun way to experience Grand Teton, is by floating the river.
And then fishing. Oh,
go ahead.
Okay, so there's actually pretty good fishing in Grand Teton. Sorry, I have to look at my notes on this one. But they are open to fishing year-round, with the following exceptions. The big fish there are cutthroat, whitefish, and mackinaw. People have caught really huge fish in that lake, but under 20 inches is kind of the norm. Jackson Lake is closed for fishing, though, October 1st through 31st. And then as far as rivers and streams where you can fish, that they have to be caught in the open and released in the water immediately, November 1st through 31st if you're catching trout. You need to have a Wyoming fishing license. And then they have some pretty specific rules on tackle, creel size and limits, and invasive fish. So you'd want to check on the National Park website to make sure you were following all those rules. But fishing guides are very popular there. You can get a fishing guide at Dornan's and other locations. If you really wanted to have a true Grand Teton experience, you could hire a guide. But if you have your own stuff and kind of an experienced fisherman, those are some guidelines.
Good. They also have guides for wildlife viewing, so you can rent some guides for that. I have a friend who did that. That's how he saw his moose and bear, actually. So, there's just so many options there. And speaking of water activities, you can rent a boat or rent like a tour that goes out to Elk Island, which is in the middle of Jackson Lake. They'll take you out there and feed you dinner. So, tons of cool options there. Biking is a really popular thing that we saw people doing at Grand Teton. We had really no idea it was this popular until the last time we went there, but I put the map up here because there's a green dotted line on this map, and it goes up this main road right here to Moose Junction, and then turns off up here and goes to Jenny Lake. So that's a bike path there, and it also heads up to this Antelope Flats Road. So there's a parking area there where you can park and get out on your bike there at Antelope Flats Road, and there's also a little parking area here at the Grovant Road right there. You can pull off and park and then hop on your bike and head up those bike paths. And then there is another path right here on this Moose Wilson Road. This is outside of the park, but that's a bike path that even goes down all the way to Junction. So tons of biking opportunities there.
That's about 67 miles of bike path, just paved bike path. So you don't need to be a mountain biker. These are paved tracks. That popular one that Matt just mentioned, the Jenny Lake to Moose Junction, is 23 miles round trip. Also, something important to know, that doggies are not allowed on that. So if you bring your dog, don't bring them on the bike path there. They're a no-no on that path. But yes, very beautiful pathways, and you can rent bikes there. I know Dornan's rents them. I think there's probably other bike rental places. So if you're not able to bring your own bike, you can rent one.
You know, we recommended taking a bike or renting a bike at Yellowstone at certain places, but we saw virtually nobody with bikes at Yellowstone. But here, that bike path was packed.
Yes, exactly. Yellowstone doesn't really have bike paths. You know, you're on the road. There's a few bike paths in Yellowstone, but not a lot of them. But like Grand Teton, it's like they're making a point to say, hey, bike around our park. And of course, anywhere in Grand Teton, you have a great view of the mountains. So it's a pretty trail too.
Definitely. And then another big part of the park is the historic sites. I'm always interested at national park sites because they acquire territory that's set aside as a national park, and then they have to do something with it. And so in this case, you know, the mountains obviously and the lakes they don't have to do anything with, but part of the thing that they acquired here was some historic sites. So they do have some of these places that you can go visit. Probably nobody really knows much about the history of it at all. They don't really talk about it too much, but some of these are very good photo ops. So this is a place called Mormon Row here. The T.A. Moulton Barn is an extremely popular place to take photos. People visit there and wait for the sun to rise in the morning. So they get there way early, like 6 o'clock, and wait for the sun to come up and take pictures with this, you know, this is like a classic Western image here. This place is called the Cunningham Cabin. So Cunningham was just an early settler here in this area. Most of these people were bought out by John D. Rockefeller Jr. as he was trying to create or turn this into a much larger national park. And so he just started buying up a bunch of land from all these people around kind of secretively, and then it hit the news and there was a lot of opposition to it. But this is a fellow's cabin here named Cunningham, and if you visit that cabin, they have a bunch of horses nearby that you can go pet and check out. Again, they have I think they have at least one dude ranch in the park. It's been around for a long time. This is a place called Meaner's Ferry. So this guy set up here forever ago named Bill Meaner created a little ferry here for early pioneers and settlers and travelers to cross the Snake River. This was kind of the best area to cross the Snake River, so put this ferry in there. And I guess they have an actual working ferry that you can float across the river. It wasn't working, or it wasn't going when we were there, I think because of COVID, but
yeah, I thought this was so cool. Like, seeing the ferry that they had right there, that picture, was really a neat boat.
Mm-hmm. And it was cool to learn about how they did the ferry. And it would have been a really nice activity for our kids to do had they had it running.
Yeah, but still cool stuff. We enjoyed it anyway.
And that little Meaner's Ferry area has some historic buildings, quite a few, that you can walk around, almost like a little village that you can walk around and check out some buildings and read some stories. So, in fact, this chapel is right there in that parking lot as well. Another kind of famous photo op here. Take a picture of the church with the cross and the mountains in the background. And of course, that's one of the big things here to do in the park. I mean, Grand Teton, very well known for being a photographer's paradise. We're not photographers ourselves. We take some pictures with our cell phone, but we're not really photographers here. So, but let's just go over a couple of the main sites that are there for you if you're a photographer. I mentioned Moore Monroe already with the Molten Barn and the mountains in the background. So Moore Monroe is just a great area because you can go take pictures, see the historic sites, and see the animals there. So cool place there. And then Schwabacher Landing is really popular for shots in the morning. By the way, you'd want to take most of your photography shots in the morning, I think, because the sun sets behind the mountains in the evening and kind of casts a shadow. It's not really great for photos.
Oh yeah, the sun's right in your eyes in the evening.
So we saw plenty of photographers lined up at both these places really early in the morning. And then up the road here, Snake River Overlook. Obviously popular because you get the Snake River in the shot as well. So this is a very famous photo from Ansel Adams taken in the 1940s that kind of helped popularize the idea to make this a national park. The whole process to make Grand Teton National Park was like a multi-decade process. It was really quite a struggle and a battle.
And it's
photo.
the viewpoint's interesting because it has that picture, which is one of the best pictures I've ever seen. I love this picture. And when you look at the real thing, it looks different now because the trees have grown. You can't see the river as well. But it's kind of fun to see the contrast of just how the landscape has changed over the years as it's filled in with the trees.
Mm-hmm. Also we saw a lot of photographers there. We already mentioned this spot a little bit here, this Oxbow Bend turnout where you might see some wildlife and all that. We stopped here and saw these beautiful flowers. They were really fragrant.
Yes, that's what I remember. I'm like, take a picture of the flowers that smell good. I felt like it was a full senses experience because it had a great smell too.
Yeah, and I believe, so you kind of got the mountain in the background. I think that's Mount Moran in the background there, but they call this Oxbow Bend because the way the river bends out right here, it looks like an ox. What do they call that thing you'd put on an ox there? Okay, let's go over a couple places nearby Grand Teton that you can see. Obviously, the most popular place nearby, I believe, would be Yellowstone National Park. I'm sure so many people do these parks together if they're coming from back east or something like that.
Yes, and if you're going to Yellowstone Park on your Grand Teton trip, we have a lot of videos on Yellowstone, but we have a video just like this all about Yellowstone if you wanted to check it out.
Yeah, so here's guys are going off in the river there at Yellowstone. We already mentioned this a little bit, but this is Teton Village. This is the gondola that we took to the top that overlooks the valley below. I mean, that was one of the best things. Just you can sit at the restaurant up there while you're overlooking the valley eating your pizza or whatever you want.
And I think like those things like the gondola, the ferry ride, Grand Teton National Park is beautiful and scenic and there's a lot of hiking there. But if, you're not a real avid hiker, it's nice to break the trip up and do a few of these other special things. And the gondola was a great way to see the valley and the mountains and get a little bit of a different experience and a great spot to sit at the top to look over the valley too.
Yeah, we saw a bunch of marmots on the rocks as we were going up and down. Cool area. And then, of course, Jackson, Wyoming. The city of Jackson, just this old western town, pretty cool place. A lot of people, I think, are quite enamored by it. Really a wealthy place, ritzy place in a way. Ski town. This is the center square there, and there's 4 of these elk arches leading into this town square. And these elk arches are actually gathered up from the local elk refuge that is nearby that Cheryl mentioned earlier. The elk gather during the winter. And then they gather these elk antlers up. Pretty cool.
Yeah, so there's a lot to do in Jackson Hole, but if that kind of town isn't your scene, at least go in and check out the elk antler arches. Those are kind of one of a kind and pretty neat to see.
Cheryl doesn't particularly care for the for Jackson, but I know that people coming from other parts of the country, this is a real highlight for their trip. See Jackson. It is a cool little town. Okay, let's talk about where to stay. I've put the map up here. This is kind of zoomed out, but I just wanted to show a couple of the campgrounds in case you had no idea like what the geography of the park is. So the two biggest campgrounds are right here at Coulter Bay Village. There has over 300 campsites in it, and then Grovant Campground down here has also over 300 sites in it. And Coulter Bay up top also has an RV park. So 300 is just a campground, then it has an RV park.
And that's the only place in the park that you can make reservations is at Coulter Bay RV Park. Everywhere else is first come, first serve.
Yep. And so those are the two biggest, most popular places to stay by far.
For camping. You can reserve lodges in the park, but as far as camping goes.
Yeah, so there's a Jackson Lodge, there's a Signal Mountain Lodge, there's a Jenny Lake Lodge right there. So there are places to stay in the park. Also, there's a Jenny Lake campground that has about 50 tent sites only. So don't do it. We did. We drove there with their trailer. We weren't exactly prepared, and so we thought they would take a trailer, but we got there and got turned away. So tent sites only at Jenny Lake, but that would be a cool one to stay too because you're right there by everything.
It was really pretty.
And then of course Jackson. So Jackson is where you'd stay, or maybe Teton Village, where you would stay if you were getting a hotel or something like that.
Yeah, they have some pretty big condos and things like that there. That's a resort town too.
There are a few small campgrounds up here, up north, that you could look into. That might be pretty nice jumping off points between Yellowstone and Grand Teton, but I would probably caution against that. I mean, if you're wanting to see the glacial lakes and do the hikes, I probably wouldn't want to stay way up north there, personally, I guess. And then it's also still a little ways away from Yellowstone. It's kind of, but maybe people do that, stay in the middle.
Yeah.
And go see both.
We would say stay in the Tetons a couple days and then go up to Yellowstone and stay in a different spot.
Yeah. All right, so we hope you enjoyed that little presentation here. We want to finish up with some of our own tips and suggestions for what to do and how to do it at Grand Teton.
All right, so these are the golden nuggets. If you've watched this whole video and stayed to the end, this is the big reward. So glad you're still with us. Okay, so we have 6 hot tips. So number 1, the early bird gets the worm at Grand Teton. This is so, we've gone to a lot of national parks, but of all the ones we've been to, it does not apply more than it applies to Grand Teton. This is kind of, I would say, a smaller park with tons of people at it. Like, it is ridiculous how many people are here.
It gets only slightly less visitors than Yellowstone, of course, right by Yellowstone, but it's a much smaller place, and so it does fill up early. From the hours of 9 to 4, the parking lots at the different attractions will be completely full, and they will spill over for about a mile onto the main road. I mean, you could have like a mile or more walk just to get to your attraction, just to get there, if you don't get there really early.
Yes.
And when we say early, we're talking about
before 9.
Before 9. Okay,
yes.
Before 9. We got to some of the places around 7 or 7:30.
Yes. So keep that in mind. If you're going to start your day later than 9 o'clock and you're going on a hike, you might get a 2-for-1 hike from the car to the trailhead and then the actual hike. So keep your hikes to the single hike.
Well, and some of the places, they had barriers preventing the overflow parking from spilling out onto the main road, because we went there during the Corona time, but one of the rangers told me they kind of like that they're keeping the crowds a little smaller at some of these places, so I don't know how long that'll continue for, but if you didn't get there early enough, you really weren't even going to get in. So that's a big important point.
Yes. Also, you can see so many animals in the morning. You don't even really have to go looking for them. They're just out and about. So, if you're leaving your campsite around 7 in the morning, you're going to see some good wildlife. And it's a great time to take pictures. So get up early. That's our tip number 1. Tip number 2 is to also be a night owl. What we like to do is we like to take a break in the middle of the day around 1 or 2. We go back to our campsite, we take a nap, we just rejuvenate, then we head out again for the rest of the day around 4:30. And by then the park's kind of cleared out. You can still find parking spaces and you're not dealing with the crowds. And one of my favorite memories of our last trip was we had a picnic dinner. We packed a dinner, we just sat and we had a beautiful view of the Tetons, and it worked out really, really well.
Yeah, we used the map to find the closest picnic spot, and we ate there as the sun was setting, and we ate right next to some horses actually. So definitely, so visit before 9 and after 4. Don't forget about that after 4 part. That really that was very helpful for us to see some things without the crowds.
Yep. So be an early bird and a night owl. Okay. Number 3, if you can, camp there.
Yeah, the camping in the park. First of all, camping is just a great way to enjoy a national park anyway. But you're closer to the activities and the wildlife. We camped at Grovant, which is one of the big campgrounds there, and we had, as we were leaving our campground every morning, we would see 1 or 2 moose. So we had many wildlife sightings there.
Yes, and another thing that's kind of unique to the Grand Teton or Grand Teton National Park is it is close to Jackson Hole. It's on a map, it's 7 minutes away, but there is traffic coming to and from Jackson Hole. It could take you longer than 7 minutes, and that's 7 minutes to the entrance of the park. Then you have to drive through the park to get to where you're going, and even though Grand Teton, from entrance to entrance, maybe an hour, it's still time that you're traveling, plus you have to travel down to Jackson Hole. And Jackson Hole on average is pretty expensive to stay there. The average hotel price is $377 a night. So, you could camp in Gravant for like $35 a night. So there's some major money savings there.
If you're going to camp, make sure you get there very early in the day. This year is 2020. It might be a little unusual because people have cabin fever from coronavirus and they're getting out to camp and all that. But the campgrounds were filling up pretty much when they open at 8 o'clock in the morning. You had to be in line. We got there at 5 o'clock to get a campsite.
5 in the morning.
And one day we noticed there were 45 campers in line at 8 o'clock when the campground opened, and probably only half of them got into the campground. So it may be a little unusual this year in 2020, but it seems like camping is becoming more and more difficult to get campsites. So all the baby boomers have retired and they've gotten trailers and they're camping now. So get there early.
Yes, and just one other thing to know about with the camping is that there, you can look on the National Park website and it will tell you when all the campgrounds are filling up, like the time they filled up that day. But that doesn't mean you can just, like if it said that they filled up at 4 p.m., that doesn't mean you can just show up at 4 p.m. That means that there was a line, and the campgrounds, there, at least at Gravant, their checkout time was 11. So people were in line early, and they would let people in as people left. And maybe there were a few stragglers that were coming out later, but yeah, you've got to get there before it says the fill time. Just get there early, know what time the campground opens, and take a nap in your car until it does. But that is one nice thing about Grand Teton National Park camping is that most of the campsites are first come, first serve. So if you're doing a last minute trip, you can still go to Grand Teton. You just need to get there early in the morning.
We'll put a link to the website that shows the fill times in the description.
Okay, so now we're on tip number 5. It doesn't have to be an expensive trip. There are a lot of free things to do, and maybe we'll make another video on free things to do in that area. But I'm going to tell you our number 1 free thing to do. Yeah. You can ride the gondola after 5:30 at night for free.
Yeah, after 5 actually.
Oh.
So the gondola is at Teton Village, which is just outside of the park on the south side on the road that goes from Moose to Wilson. And very popular place, ski resort, restaurants, things for the kids to do there, like trampolines and stuff like that. So free gondola ride after 5 o'clock up to the top of the mountain. And then when we were up there, we got some pizza. They have a very nice restaurant up there that you need reservations for, but then they have kind of a where the pizza's already made. You just go in there and buy a little cafe there. So
yeah, okay. And this was one of my very favorite things about this national park, because I've never seen it anywhere else. They have tons of wild berries everywhere. That's number 6, is pick some berries. There are thimbleberries, raspberries, and huckleberries, and they're all along the side of the trail. And when you get your little newspaper from the park when you check in, there's even a little thing written about it that says that the national parks are cool with you eating the berries. Just know what kind are poisonous and which kinds aren't. Don't eat anything you don't know what it is. But they do allow the visitors to pick the berries, and it's kind of fun to get a little snack while you're hiking.
So we're in the middle of kind of preparing some itineraries and travel guides for next year. We want to prepare an audio guide, because when I go to the national parks and some of these cool places like this, I've always thought it would be nice to have something that was a little more meaningful, that kind of added to the experience of my trip a little bit more. It told me some of the stories. The stories hidden all over the map in Grand Teton, some of the names behind the peaks and all that. So look for that to come out next year. And please subscribe to our channel if you like this, and let us know if you have any comments or suggestions.
Hey, thanks for watching.